be a bus operator or any type of employee in a transit public service type of business, our purpose is to transport them from point A to point B in a safe manner.
They have to be totally alert. And, if they're under the influence, then, everything is slower, and their reaction time is slower.
And if you are under the influence of an illegal substance or an alcohol, then you shouldn't be out there.
What we're going to take a look at today is reasonable suspicion, making the decision to refer one of your employees for drug and alcohol testing. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, especially if you've worked your way up the ranks. How do you tell an employee, someone you've worked with for years, that you're referring them for a reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol test? What we're going to do today is give you the tools and the information to do that. The bottom line here is safety and saving lives. The Federal Transit Administration is required to issue a rule requiring recipients of certain FTA funding to train some supervisors on reasonable suspicion determinations on safety-sensitive employees for prohibited use of drugs and misuse of alcohol. This program will define reasonable suspicion, describe the standards for making reasonable suspicion determinations, and provide guidance regarding employee interviews in a reasonable suspicion situation.
I have no problem in pulling somebody out of service or taking somebody down for a test.
It's a call you have to make, because if you make the wrong call, you just make the wrong call. But if you make the right call, then you've made the right one.
People realize that if they wanted to continue in this field, they're going to have to be subject to certain rules and regulations.
It's your job as a supervisor to make the reasonable suspicion determination for employees performing safety-sensitive functions. The key phrase here is performing a safety-sensitive function. An employee's job description or job title is not the sole qualification here. We're talking about any employee performing a safety-sensitive function, whether or not that function is specifically mentioned in their job description. There are 5 major categories of employees who perform safety-sensitive functions. First are employees who operate revenue service vehicles. Second are armed security personnel. Third, non-revenue service vehicle operators who hold a commercial driver's license. Fourth, employees who do maintenance on revenue service vehicles and equipment used in revenue service. And finally, employees who control, dispatch, or move revenue service vehicles. These employees must not use alcohol while performing a safety-sensitive function, 4 hours prior to performing the function, and up to 8 hours following an accident or until the employee undergoes a post-accident test, whichever occurs first. FTA regulations clearly state that ingestion of cocaine, marijuana, opiates, amphetamines, and PCP is prohibited at all times. If there's reasonable suspicion that an employee is performing his or her job while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or both, he or she should be immediately referred for testing. Breath tests for alcohol and urine testing by a certified laboratory for illegal drugs.
The man that's an alcoholic may have been an alcoholic for years, and you don't even know it, and he's worked right beside you. But you just keep your eyes open to the everyday normal activities that people do, and it will show up sooner or later.
The referral must be based on specific, contemporaneous, articulable observations. That means what you see right then, and that you can clearly explain the behavior, speech, appearance, or body odor of the covered employee.
When we observe someone on the floor who we think is either under the influence or has a problem, at first it's hard to make a call because you really don't want to finger somebody out. But then you have to do it for the good of everybody and for the good of the company. And after it's all over with, it is a good feeling to know that you did help someone.
Only one supervisor's opinion is necessary to require a reasonable suspicion test. But to be sure, keep in mind the reasonable and prudent rule of thumb. That means a similarly trained and experienced supervisor in the same situation would come to the same conclusion based on the appearance, behavior, speech, or body odors of the covered employee.
Generally, I like to have another supervisor confirm that with me, or if that's not possible, I try to think, well, if another supervisor was sitting here, would they come up with the same conclusion based on the same set of circumstances?
It really comes down to saving lives. After all, drug or alcohol use by transit employees in safety-sensitive positions generally leads to one thing: disaster. Accidents like these, lives lost like these. It doesn't have to happen if we spot and help drug and alcohol abusers before they hurt themselves or others. Any employees exhibiting signs or symptoms of prohibitive drug use or alcohol misuse should be immediately referred for a reasonable suspicion test.
If you're the type of individual that has to imbibe, so to speak, right prior to coming to work, that's not good. Now, we're not saying you cannot have a drink here and there. We're talking about the individual that's going to take a nip at 3:30 in the morning and he's got to come to work at 4:30 in the morning.
You know, you're hauling people, kids, someone's loved one. You know, people who depend on you to get them where they got to go. And if you're under the influence of an illegal substance or an alcohol, you shouldn't be out there.
One beer. Not a lot, right? Well, one beer slows reaction time and can put the life of your employee and the lives of others in danger. For the purpose of the FTA regulations, alcohol is alcohol in any form. So in addition to obvious beverages, it includes mouthwash, cough syrup, prescribed medicines, extracts, and candy with liquor. The misuse of alcohol, any alcohol, slows down physical responses and progressively impairs mental functions. It is a depressant. It affects vision, judgment, reaction time, memory, and most important, its use can affect the public safety. What you as a supervisor have to watch out for are a variety of short-term indicators that give you reasonable suspicion of alcohol misuse. The indicators include physical appearance, behavior, speech, and body odors. We'll be using an actor to help demonstrate some of the signs and symptoms of alcohol misuse to give some reference for employee assessment. Physical symptoms of alcohol misuse include lack of coordination, bloodshot or watery eyes, possibly constricted pupils, and/or an alcoholic blackout. This does not necessarily mean passing out. These blackouts are periods of time that the employee is conscious, but just can't remember what happened during that period of time. Behavioral signs include a sleepy or stuporous condition. Under the influence of alcohol, some people demonstrate aggressive or antagonistic behavior. Another sign could be a particular body odor, the smell of alcohol on the breath. There are other indicators to watch for. An employee can hide alcohol in any kind of container, a soda can or bottle, coffee mug or flask. When you have reasonable suspicion of alcohol misuse in the workplace, you must talk to the employee immediately and refer them for a test. Later in today's training, we'll show you how to handle that conversation. Just remember, when you refer an employee for reasonable suspicion testing, you're doing your job, and most likely, you're saving lives.
The main dangers of alcohol and drug abuse or use is a safety factor. I mean, that's the overriding concern.
Thank you. We can all agree that alcohol and drug-free workplaces save lives. Therefore, when you're supervising employees who perform safety-sensitive functions, you need to be on constant lookout for illegal drug use. Reasonable suspicion of drug use can be determined in a number of ways. First, you should be able to recognize the illegal substance or the paraphernalia that is used with it. Second, observe your employees. Is anyone exhibiting signs or symptoms of drug use? There are 4 short-term indicators of illegal drug use. These include physical appearance, behavior, speech, and body odors. We're going to talk about the 5 drugs prohibited by the Federal Transit Administration. These are cocaine, marijuana, amphetamines, opiates, and phencyclidine, or more commonly referred to as PCP. We'll take them one at a time. One thing you should remember, it's not your job to diagnose exactly what specific substance is being used. You just need to recognize specific types of behavior that may indicate illegal drug use. Again, to better help you make your reasonable suspicion determination, we're going to use an actor to demonstrate some of the signs and symptoms you should watch for. The first prohibited drug is cocaine, one of the most widely used illegal drugs. Cocaine is a powerful physical and mental stimulant that is usually snorted into the nose, rubbed on the gums, or injected into the veins. Common paraphernalia include a single-edged razor blade and a small mirror or piece of smooth metal, a rolled-up dollar bill or a half straw or metal tube, and a small screw cap vial or folded paper packet containing cocaine. Crack, which is a derivative of cocaine, looks like small rocks. It is commonly smoked from a crushed aluminum can with pinholes and occasionally from a glass pipe. There are a variety of signs and symptoms of cocaine use. A runny or irritated nose, dilated pupils, unusual defensiveness, agitation, restlessness, and difficulty in concentration. Marijuana is another widely used drug. It acts as a mild tranquilizer and alters perception. Marijuana is a green to brown leafy material that resembles oregano and can be rolled into joints or smoked from a pipe. Often, a cigar is hollowed out and filled with marijuana. Another variety of marijuana is hashish or hash, a compressed tar-like substance ranging in color from pale yellow to black. It is usually sold in small chunks wrapped in aluminum foil. It is also smoked from a pipe. Some of the signs and symptoms of marijuana use that should be watched for are bloodshot eyes, lack of motivation, diminished concentration, distortions in time estimations, increased appetite, and seemingly uncontrollable laughter, slow speech and a lackadaisical, I don't care attitude. Another indicator of marijuana use is its distinctive odor. It has a pungent aroma resembling a combination of sweet alfalfa and incense, and usually lingers on the user's clothing. Amphetamines are sold in counterfeit capsules or as white, flat, double-scored mini-bennies. They act as central nervous system stimulants and speed up the mind and body. They are usually taken by mouth. Signs and symptoms of their use can include dilated pupils, profuse sweating, hyperexcitability and restlessness, and usually aggressive behavior. Amphetamine users can also be prone to impulsive and risk-taking behavior, not the kind of behavior that is appropriate for people in safety-sensitive occupations. Opiates are narcotics, such as opium, heroin, morphine, and codeine. They alleviate pain, depress body functions, and slow reactions. Opiates may be taken in pill form, or they may be smoked or injected. Some of the signs and symptoms of opiate use are difficulty in breathing, constricted pupils, lack of coordination, physical fatigue and drowsiness, possible puncture marks or tracks on the arms caused by needles. Opiate users often suffer from excessive itching as a result of drug use. Commonly called PCP, Phencyclidine is used infrequently today. It is not generally used in the workplace because of the severe disorientation that occurs. But you, as a supervisor, must be aware of it. Phencyclidine is a tranquilizer. It is commonly sold as a clear liquid and occasionally as a creamy granular powder, packaged in 1-inch square aluminum foil or folded into packets. Marijuana joints or cigarettes are often dipped or sprayed with PCP. The drug is also smoked and snorted. The potential for accidents and overdose emergencies with PCP is high because of the extreme mental effects combined with the anesthetic effect it has on the body. Some signs and symptoms of PCP use are violent or combative behavior, dilated pupils, extreme mood swings, and agitation. PCP users also display severe confusion as well as an inability to speak coherently. Those are the 5 illegal drugs and some of the classic symptoms of drug use. You need to keep in mind that some users will use 2 or more drugs at one time or combine drugs with alcohol. These people are known as polyusers. The effects of polydrug use vary widely depending on the combination of drugs involved. If you have reasonable suspicion that one of your employees is using any of these drugs or a combination of drugs or drugs and alcohol, immediately inform them that they're being referred for a reasonable suspicion test.
Sometimes you get a call, and it's on someone you know, but you know, then you have to do your job.
Most supervisors, whether they make the right call or the wrong call, the employees on the floor, they do appreciate it, and they see that somebody is trying to help.
As a supervisor, you play an important role in protecting your employees and the public from injury or even death. This final segment of the program is going to review your responsibilities as a supervisor, the FTA regulations for making reasonable suspicion determinations, and detail the interview and referral process. One of the most important functions you perform as a supervisor is watching your employees for indications of drug and alcohol use and making reasonable suspicion determinations. It is important to note that long-term indicators such as absenteeism, tardiness, occupational injuries, or moving traffic violations are not a basis for a reasonable suspicion determination. Now, the FTA does not require a supervisor to document each and every reasonable suspicion determination in writing, but any documentation generated must be saved for at least 1 year. A reasonable suspicion determination has to be based on contemporaneous, articulable observation. That means you have to be able to clearly explain what you see right then concerning behavior, speech, appearance, and body odor of the covered employee. For drugs, these observations can be made at any time. For alcohol, you must make the observation just before, during, or immediately after the covered employee performs a safety-sensitive function. Remember the reasonable and prudent rule of thumb that another trained and experienced supervisor in the same situation would come to the same conclusion based on appearance, behavior, speech, or body odors of the covered employee.
It is important to be confident in a reasonable suspicion, no matter what you say it is, or the diplomatic way you say it, or the polite way you say it. They're looking at it as being accused of being on drugs and alcohol.
Once you've made a reasonable suspicion determination, you must speak to the employee immediately. Approach them in a confidential, non-judgmental, and non-accusatory manner, and tell them you need to speak with them privately. Once you're in a private situation, inform the employee of your reasonable suspicion determination and that he or she is being referred for an alcohol and drug test. Do not attempt to diagnose the employee's problems or behavior. Allow the employee the opportunity to describe the events that took place from his or her perspective. Denial should be an expected reaction. If a person knows they will test positive, they may give many explanations and protest strongly to avoid testing. At all times, it is important that you respect the dignity and confidentiality of the employee. You conclude the encounter by telling the employee where to report for the test.
We had a man that had an alcohol problem, and the supervisor, the frontline supervisor, picked the problem up. He came to me about the problem. We talked to the man and tried to encourage him to do something. And after about 3 days, he did come to us and he did seek help. And he's been a good employee ever since then.
Although it's not legally mandated or required, it is recommended that the individual be accompanied to the designated test center or collection site. It's not wise to let an employee who's under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs proceed alone to the site or to drive home. It's not safe for the employee, and others can be endangered as well. Leaving the individual on their own gives them the opportunity to ingest another substance that could affect test results. It is also possible they won't show up for the test. An employee's refusal to submit to a test constitutes an immediate positive drug or alcohol test result. In the instance of a refusal or actual positive drug or alcohol test result, the employee is immediately removed from his or her safety-sensitive position and immediately referred to a substance abuse professional for evaluation. The FTA rules do not require that an employee who tests positive or who refuses to take a test be terminated. In fact, your employer may have a second chance policy. However, such an employee may not perform a safety-sensitive function again until he or she has been evaluated by the substance abuse professional, successfully completed rehabilitation as recommended by the substance abuse professional, undergone a second evaluation, and passed a return to duty test. It's your job as a supervisor to make reasonable suspicion determinations. It may not be the easiest thing to do, but remember, it saves lives.